Welcome to my new series where I will give you a quick video examples of why said consoles are awesome by showing an awesome game for that system. Today we are looking at the Sega Genesis, and the game that makes it awesome is Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. Last time, I talked about the third game in Sega's Mickey's Illusion series, which was World of Illusion. In that video, I brought up Castle of Illusion a few times, which is the first game in that series. So since I enjoyed playing World of Illusion for that video, I decided to do the same for Castle of Illusion. Unlike World of Illusion, I didn't own Castle of Illusion as a kid, thus I never played it back in the day. I never even knew it existed until at least 2007, I think. I grew up with World of Illusion and Mickey Mania, so I have a lot of nostalgia for those games. There is not a single drop of nostalgia for Castle of Illusion in my body, but the moment I learned of its existence, I knew I wanted to play it. I loved the other Mickey and Disney games on the Genesis, so I knew it would be good. I eventually bought it for my Genesis and never really gotten around to playing it till much later. So let's see how it holds up today.
Who does the world's most fun cartoon character in a hot new 16-bit game?
Genesis does.
Who does Disney animation as only a 16-bit video game can?
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does.
Who gives you $30 cash back when you buy a new Sega Genesis system?
Genesis does.
Buy a Sega Genesis system now and get $30 cash back.
Castle of Illusion was developed by Sega AM7 and published by Sega in 1990. This was during the time when Sega was still having trouble selling and marketing the Genesis in North America. They needed all the games they could get to convince people to drop the NES and move to the next level with the Sega Genesis. Unlike now, just because you have a stronger next-gen console didn't necessarily make that console an easy sale. Nintendo was such a big name in Japan and America, they were able to have a complete lock on the market and had monopolistic safeguards in place that made it impossible for other developers to develop games for other companies' consoles like Sega's, even though many wanted to, but the risk of pissing off Nintendo was just too high. So most didn't bother with Sega, which is why the Master System flopped hard in America and Japan. But Sega started to make waves in the market with the Genesis, and eventually developers took the leap and said, screw it, I'm making games for Sega. But Sega had to rely on their own games to convince people and developers that the market just didn't belong to Nintendo. In actuality, a lot of store retailers and developers loved that Sega made such a big dent against Nintendo, because now they had more flexibility. Nintendo made life hard for other developers and retailers and made them all feel like they owed Nintendo. Sorry for going on a rant, but I just wanted to make clear about how the gaming marketplace was back then. So before we move on, let's all thank Sega for helping the industry grow.
Sega.
Okay, now back to Castle of Illusion. Story is as basic as it gets. Minnie is captured by the evil witch Mizrabel, who wants to steal her youth, and it's up to Mickey Mouse to go on a quest to save her. But come on, we all know back then story didn't matter in games. Personally, I still feel they don't matter all that much today. If you want a great story, go read a book or watch a film. these are games, where gameplay is king. Sure, there are exceptions to that rule, but you know what I mean. Obviously, Castle of Illusion is a side-scrolling platformer, which most games were. Mickey controls fine, but sadly, he can't run unless going down a slope. He can jump, but he can't jump on his enemies like Mario, because he will take damage. Instead, you have to press the jump button again so Mickey can brace his ass to land on his enemies, and by doing so, it lets Mickey bounce higher than he can jump. This mechanic is useful for getting to places you normally couldn't reach. That is usually how you will attack your foes, but you can also throw apples, marbles, and candles at them. You can regain your health by collecting stars. Now, scattered around each level are diamonds, which are just used for points, a mechanic from the arcade era. There's also Mickey ears that will give you an extra life. Depending on the level you're on, you either collect apples, marbles, or candles for throwing, but sometimes they come in a little bag, which gives you 10 instead of 1. The main point of the game, besides saving Minnie, is that you have to collect all 7 rainbow gems, so you can build a rainbow bridge to the castle tower where Minnie Mouse is being held. Most of these gems you get after beating a boss, but sometimes you just get it in parts of the level, which is kind of weird. Graphically, it's not as good as World of Illusion, but for 1990, it blew away anything the NES had and was a great looking game to showcase what the Genesis was capable of.
But the important thing is this really demonstrates the capabilities of what you can go and do with the 16-bit system. Here's Mickey Mouse, and if you take a look, he really looks exactly like himself. We haven't gone and sacrificed any of the detail on the character at all.
Is this new this year?
This is brand new. It just started shipping within the last couple of weeks. And I want to show you just some of the wonderful animation here of Mickey. He's just walking along, and then the beautiful, brilliantly colored backgrounds as he walks in and the game begins. Here he is.
So you're playing off the Disney animation heritage here.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty classic.
Now watch this.
backgrounding, yeah.
There he is, and he's just, waiting for it.
One of his old moves from the cartoon.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, he's pretty close to the edge there. Let's see, he might have a little problem. Uh-oh! Oh, look at the emotions on his face.
Yes.
That's what's really making the difference between this generation of video game system and the generation...
And the relative depth of that back.
The power of the Genesis allowed developers to show more emotions in their characters. There's a nice mix between cute, lovely levels and dark, creepy levels. As mentioned in the last video, some of these stages appeared in World of Illusion, such as the spider level, the library, and Candyland. Every world has its own sub-levels that really keep each world interesting and fresh. Doing this allows for each world to be a little longer and fun to look at because it's not just the same level backgrounds dragging on. The first world alone is great because at first you're in a forest, then you're up in the trees, jumping on leaves, dodging spiders, then you're in a dark forest full of ghosts, and then you're in an underground cavern, finally ending up back in the forest to fight the first boss, which is this tree. The creativity shown in Castle of Illusion is great and never gets to the point where you're getting tired of looking at the game. There's never a dull moment. In World 2, there's a section with a cool mechanic where you flip the screen upside down and it kills all your enemies, and it looks like you're walking on the ceiling. You're gonna want to do this because in this level, there's these really cheap clown enemies that will hit you if you don't flip the screen. I believe Sega did a great job on level design, simply because some stages force you to take a different path, because sometimes just going towards the right won't get you anywhere. It's nothing overly confusing or difficult. It feels just right. Some levels you go right, and some you go up and then back down. It's just a nice way to make a 2D platformer more fun and interesting. The enemies in this game all match their world and look great as well. Their designs are very well done. There's just so much variety in each world. Mushrooms, toy soldiers, spiders, ghosts, knights, bats, and these stupid A's, which are impossible to avoid. And there's more than that. Sega went all out. With each passing world, I was just so invested in this game. It's one of those games you just don't want to stop playing until you beat it. Music, on the other hand, is mostly generic throughout. There are some decent tracks, but nothing here really ever stood out for me, except the boss battle music. That track is great. I personally don't like the music in Candyland. It's way too repetitive, and it just sounds more like noise. I think we all love the track in the first stage though. It's just a catchy and memorable tune. Overall okay, but could have been better. Each world is behind its own door in the castle, which is a nice way to separate all the worlds. It's just like the picture frames in Super Mario 64. I guess you could say Super Mario 64 is just Nintendo's take on Sega's Castle of Illusion. Castle, 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 castle. I know the game is called Castle of Illusion and all, so I know it makes sense to have a castle world. But I feel there is a castle world in this game for a different reason other than just the title. Sega must have loved Castlevania. Because the last world just reminds me of it. It's a castle with annoying bats and knights that throw shit at you, and you have to jump on giant cogs. And just like in Castlevania, where you whip candles to collect items and hearts, here you collect the candles themselves to throw at people. The whole stage screams Castlevania, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, who doesn't love some Castlevania? Maybe this was Sega's way of showing Konami that Castlevania could work and be even better on the Genesis. Later on, they did get Castlevania Bloodlines though. Castle of Illusion is not a very long game, but it can be challenging, much more so than World of Illusion, and that's something it has in its favor. Compared to World of Illusion, it took me 2 tries to beat this game. The bosses are much harder as well. You actually have to be careful because you can easily get wrecked if you don't learn their patterns. On some of them, their hitbox is a bit iffy, and some bosses seem like they take way too much damage before they die, but never so much that it gets frustrating. Well, to be fair, this boss is sort of frustrating. All those bosses have their own unique patterns, keeping each encounter exciting and challenging. Later on, Sega re-released Castle of Illusion on the Sega Saturn in Japan, only it was called Sega Ages I Love Mickey Mouse, which came with Castle of Illusion and Quackshot. There was also a full-blown remake in 2013, which came out on the PlayStation Network, Xbox Arcade, and PC. I do have it on Steam, but I haven't played much of it yet. I'll talk about that one someday as well. From what I played, it seemed pretty good. There was also an 8-bit version of Castle of Illusion for the Sega Master System, not to be confused with the sequel, Land of Illusion, for the same console. This was the first Mickey Mouse game on the Genesis, and it's no wonder why a lot of Genesis fans love this game. It looks great and it plays great. I'm sure for most people, Castle of Illusion was a must-buy for early adopters of the system. I would have loved to own this game when I was a kid. I really enjoyed Castle of Illusion. I don't love it like World of Illusion or Mickey Mania, but it doesn't stop me from enjoying it. I suggest if you never played any of those Mickey games, I say play this one first because you may appreciate it more. The graphics are really good, but clearly not as good as later Genesis games, but there is a charm to it that's not really matched by the other titles. So if you want to play a great Mickey game, try out Castle of Illusion. It's a fun game with some good level design and a nice art style. Music is a hit or miss though. The difficulty will range from player to player. I think it's one of the harder Genesis Mickey Mouse games that I have played, but not too hard that you or any kids will be frustrated with it. I hope you enjoy taking a look back with me on this great early Genesis title. I hope you give the game a try, because Castle of Illusion is a fun, awesome game and is a great example of why the Sega Genesis is awesome.